TV Channel 4 Boise.
The funding for this program is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and the Friends of 4, 10, and 12.
In Ada County, legislative reapportionment has thrown two incumbent Republicans, moderate Jerry Deckard and conservative Gene Winchester, into the same district. In Salmon, conservative Republican Ray Infanger faces a primary challenge, and Senator Bill Moore in Kootenai County faces the same situation. Tonight, background on those races in our continuing coverage of the Idaho vote. Good evening. We continue our look tonight at some of the key legislative primary elections that will be decided in Idaho next Tuesday. We'll look at a House race in the Salmon area and a Senate race in Kootenai County. In each case, a conservative incumbent Republican is being challenged by a candidate in his own party who calls himself more moderate. A challenge of Republican conservatives by Republican moderates has been a theme in a number of legislative races this year. But we'll begin tonight in a race where two incumbents, one the leader of a House moderate faction, the other a spokesman for the most conservative group in the House, are placed in the same legislative district due to reapportionment. Gary Richardson reports on the Deckard-Winchester race in Ada County.
Among state lawmakers running for re-election, there is little disagreement about legislative reapportionment.
I think the legislature did a poor job. I did not support most of the reapportionment bills we passed last year, and probably they should have been subjected to the court. But the court did a worse job. I mean, this plan that they did is just terrible. It's expensive, it's cumbersome, it's poor representation, but we're here, and so we've got to live with it this time and do the best we can.
I think the reapportionment plan was a real example of the failure of the legislature to act responsibly. Also, I think it's a failure of the judicial system to act responsibly.
One of the toughest problems lawmakers face in trying to draw their own legislative boundaries is coming up with a plan in which they don't have to run against each other, especially against members of their own party. But the court-ordered plan did just that when the legislature could not come up with a constitutional reapportionment plan. In western Ada County, the court created a new district, forcing two incumbent Republicans with very different political philosophies to run against each other.
This time the voters have really got a clear choice, and that's one thing I like about it. I wish everybody would vote, and then we'd know what, have an expression of what people really want, because Mr. Deckard and myself are just the opposite ends of the spectrum. He voted every tax increase, I opposed them all. He voted every supplemental budget, I opposed him. He voted for every fee increase, I opposed him. So they do have a choice.
CUNA rancher Lyman Gene Winchester is completing his sixth term representing predominantly rural Owyhee and southwestern Ada counties. He often takes ultra-conservative positions and boasts of saying no to much of the legislation that comes before him in Boise.
These days, you don't need a rifle to protect your family, but we do need another Winchester. Representative Gene Winchester, Republican, District 14.
This is Gene Winchester. When the big spenders try to skin you and your family alive with higher and higher taxes, I'll be there like a shot to stop them.
Winchester. Re-elect Representative Gene Winchester, Conservative Republican, District 14.
I'm quite convinced that it's much more conservative than the legislature makeup. And I think those people are in some districts, maybe downtown Boise or something like that, the cross-section may be more towards the middle. But out there in the hinterlands where people roll up their sleeves and work for a living, they're conservative. They don't want all this big government and taxes, and they're not out of step with the people that, like myself, that represent those folks. Certainly, the issue of big government is part of the philosophy difference between myself and my opponent. For example, land use planning again came up. We voted to make it optional. Passed the House and Senate, and vetoed by the governor. And I feel that planning is good, But the controls, when they're dictating to people the uses that they are and as strict as they are, why they've just gone too far. And we tried to back that up a little bit without destroying the planning process. My opponent, I guess, feels that government should make that decision for people. He even voted against a bill that said once the government's assigned you a zone, they shouldn't be allowed to change it for 4 years, which they do in some situations. It would give the property owner a little protection so he'd at least know what it was for 4 years, and I voted for that. He voted against it. It's just a series of those types of things on property rights, I think, are a very important issue, and we're losing the battle slowly but surely to big government.
At least as I see the issues is whether we, between my opponent and myself, whether we're going to send someone to the State House that can work towards solving the problems of state and developing some solutions and some goals and objectives for the future, or whether we're going to send someone down there to essentially vote no and obstruct.
Winchester's opponent is former Eagle Mayor Jerry Deckard, who has held his legislative seat for 1 term. Though a freshman, Deckard is credited with shepherding the 4-cent sales tax through the House over the opposition of conservatives within his own party.
I think I'm right in the mainstream, and I think that's the Republican Party has got to come out. It has come out in a leadership role as far as what we're going to do with education and the future of our country as far as the education process works. There is some moderation there. I am conservative. Whether, you know, how you want to identify a conservative or a moderate or whatever, but when it comes to running my business and when it comes to expecting government to act responsibly, I'm a conservative. But I also know that when we talk about education, for instance, the alternatives are rather limited to how you're going to arrive at gaining the dollars that it takes to educate the kids. And the people have said that they want that responsibility put on a broad-based tax with the government, with state government. That's where it's got to come from.
In his first 2 years as the state representative from District 14, Jerry Deckard devoted a lot of his time and energies working to ensure Idaho's education system is second to none. He's also concerned that our children have a place to work once they leave school. Jerry Deckard knows that business will prosper if the state has a sound, stable tax structure, so businesses know what to expect from year to year. We need leaders in the legislature who can develop a fair and workable tax structure.
What's your position in the Swan Falls debate?
So I've supported putting water on the land. That's what built this state up, and there's no substitute. We can't go out and chop up coal and irrigate with that. We've got to have the water on the land. That's where it belongs. They got a very misleading ad on now, Idaho Power does, about that's very critical to the rate base. It has nothing to do with the rate base. I think Idaho Power just found a great big plum that they didn't think they were entitled to, and they'd like to hang on to it.
You see, they want Idaho Power customers to pay millions of dollars a year in higher electric bills so that these developers can profit. And that ain't right.
Well, I think, number one, the courts have got to solve the problem once and for all, no matter what that legislature does. But I think, secondly, I don't think we really need to be subordinating to more desert entry land when we have the farm economy and the trouble it is. And ultimately, the ratepayer is going to pay, whether he be a pumper or whether he be a residential or a commercial user. And I think that those people that are going to use that water and have it prioritized to their benefit are going to have to pay for it.
What are you doing to win your campaign?
What am I doing to win? I've dedicated the 3 weeks prior to May 22nd to doing nothing but campaigning. We're doing everything that you're supposed to do in a campaign. That's road signs, yard signs, brochures, door-to-door campaigning, radio, newspaper, and trying to meet as many folks as we can.
It seems like Deckard's a lot busier than you are. Is that your perception?
I don't know. I've got a large family. I've got a farm to run. We stayed in the legislature far too long, and I've got crops to get in and animals to care for, and if he's busy, I guess he's busy.
Do you really want to win?
Oh, sir, we're going to win anyway. I don't care how busy he is, we're still going to win.
Six-term incumbent Republican Ray Infanger is in a tough primary race in one of the state's largest legislative districts. Paula Wissel has our report tonight on the House race in the new Legislative District 30.
This is Salmon, a town of 3,000 isolated in the mountains of central Idaho. It's just one small portion of the new Legislative District 30, which encompasses all of Lemhi, Custer, Clark, Jefferson, and Butte counties. Most of this area used to be a part of District 20. Reapportionment hasn't changed the makeup of this district that dramatically. It's just gotten larger with the addition of Butte County to the other four. To adequately cover this district, one must drive about 700 miles. From Salmon in Lemhi County to the other end of the district, Rigby in Jefferson County, is about 175 miles. If history tells us anything about this district, it's that legislators here tend to have a long tenure in office. Turnover in legislative seats is more likely to occur as a result of a retirement than an election defeat. And lively and heated legislative races here are more the exception than the rule. This year, only 1 out of the 3 lawmakers from here has any opposition. He is Republican Ray Infanger, currently serving his 12th year in the House. Both a Republican and a Democrat have filed for his seat. When was the last time you had a primary opponent?
Gee, I don't remember. Probably 4 years. See, was it 4 years ago? I can't remember, Paula.
Ed Smith is opposing Infanger in the primary. He owns an insurance agency in Salmon. What made you decide to run this time?
Kind of a case of put up or shut up. I've been dissatisfied with the representation we've had for a number of years, and things kind of came together this year enough to where I thought I could feasibly run and do a good job on it.
A Democratic Party candidate, Lemhi County Prosecuting Attorney Jim Herndon, sees the opposition to Infanger as indicative of the general dissatisfaction with the representative in the district.
I think that's indicative of maybe why I'm running. The reason being is we just don't feel, from Jefferson County to Lemhi County, that we have adequate representation of Mr. Infanger. We don't think he represents our interests, at least not vocally enough.
My opponent has traditionally voted against funding for education since he's been in office, or at least as many past years as I can find his voting record. I am very pro-education. I think that he is, I really don't want to get into any real personalities on it. This year, for instance, my opponent was a prime mover to roll over the estimated $20 million surplus that we were expected to have in this state into next year's budget and help fund education that way. I was opposed to that. I thought it was fiscally irresponsible to use an estimated budget for next year's, or estimated surplus for next year's budget. One thing I think I could push for and be quite well backed on it, I don't think it takes 3 months to do what they have done in the last several years of legislative duty in Boise. Probably a little less harangue and posturing and a little bit more getting down to work.
Incumbent Representative Infanger, who owns a small ranch and a heating and sheet metal shop in Salmon, feels, as one might expect, that he is meeting the needs of his constituents.
I think the main thing that everyone up here is interested in is not so much government. It just seems like everywhere people turn anymore, there's so much government. And I don't think it's a war against government. I think it's a war against unnecessary government.
What have you been able to do to limit government?
Oh, I think on the legislation we've passed, I've worked on some that's helped. I'll cite you one example right now. I served on the Indian Study Committee. We've had lots of problems up in this area, you know, I mean, on the salmon fishing, the Indian go down the lower end to catch the fish. And all the people up here, why they think it's terrible, the Indians and the fish. And so, for the last 2 years, we've met on problems like that with the Indian tribes. And we had, 2 to 3 bills last year on the thing, but there's still some big ones to hit yet. That's the water issues. And I suspect this next time I will start working on those issues.
Why do you continue to run? What do you think you have to offer the people of
I just love to serve people. I just like to help them on their problems.
What kinds of things have you accomplished?
Oh, golly, to name them over 12 years, that takes quite a while, Paula.
I think Ray is an advocate of less taxation and less spending. I find absolutely nothing wrong with that. Nobody likes taxes. I was a proponent of the 4-cent sales tax this year. I thought, and I still do, that it's very necessary, the funding for what people tell me around this legislative district that they have to have better education, better transportation, better highways, some type of fund for indigent problems on the county level.
Oh, as I can say, I'll just have to run on my record, won't I?
As in any campaign, name identification in this race is a key factor. But how does one canvass a district that covers 1/5 of the state and where it takes an entire day to drive through the 5 counties? It's difficult to door-to-door campaign where it's often 10 miles from one door to the next. Name identification in this district is more likely to come from the candidate being from a family with a long history in the area.
Here we know everybody for 50 miles. A small area, my gosh, you're going along the road, you wave at everyone because you know he lives up this canyon, he lives up this and over there. All year long I'm campaigning when I'm trying to help people.
Will you be putting up yard signs or posters or anything like that? Would you say that you're well known enough you don't have to do that?
I suppose that helps. I think the most effective is when you go from house to house. I think that's the best campaigning to do. It's a little hard up here where you have such a large area. At this time, our legislative district is almost 1/5 of the land area of the state. It is enormous, but we have a whole lot of cows and few people.
Ed Smith isn't new to the region either. He's a native of Salmon and still has family in the area.
I'd like to get with you, since you're running for the house down there and I'm running for the house up here, I'd like to get with you on the subordination of water rights on Swan Falls. I think I've got it down fairly pat in my own mind, but we're having a forum up here next Thursday, and I'm sure that's going to come up quite hot and heavy.
Smith admits that he's new to the political game. This is the first time he's ever run for office.
I've got yard signs out all over the district, signs in business windows. We have a very large direct mail. I say we, my wife and I and my family have been doing most of it. Direct mail that's going out next week. A brochure, a generic type of brochure with some of my ideas in it and some pictures. And then on the 19th, the Boy Scouts in every major town in every county will be handing out a little flyer, a generic flyer, again trying to keep my face in front of the voters as much as possible just prior to primary day.
To win in District 30, one must win in the eastern part of the district in Jefferson County, which has about as many registered voters as the other 4 counties combined. According to former state senator from here, James Ellsworth, who served for 12 years, that will make it difficult for Ed Smith to defeat Ray Infanger.
I think that an incumbent that has a opportunity to become known in the district definitely has an advantage in the election, because a newcomer has so many areas and counties to travel in. It's difficult for him to become known. He'll have to do a lot of campaigning in the other counties to become acquainted with the people, and I think that will be his biggest problem.
In Kootenai County, a conservative Republican senator is also in a tough primary fight. The race in District 2 pits Bill Moore of Hayden Lake against Dennis Carlson of Post Falls. Moore is in his 2nd term in the Senate. He's an insurance agent. Carlson is a farmer on the Rathdrum Prairie. Cal Humphreys in Coeur d'Alene has our report tonight on that race.
The pattern has been in the past that voter turnout is low in primary elections around this area. This will, more than likely, favor Moore because it is usually the staunch conservatives who get out and vote no matter what, and this is where most of Moore's vote will come from. Carlson has described himself as somewhat of a moderate. This should be a benefit to him for one very interesting reason. Over the past decade, Kootenai County Republican Party leaders have been influenced a great deal by a conservative way of thinking. Now, with new leaders, this pattern is shifting to that of a moderate approach. And many experts feel that this will give Carlson more support from the Republican Party in this area. Now for the issues. There are 4 main issues facing the candidates in the upcoming primary election. Reapportionment, better known as 14B, the lottery issue, the 1-cent sales tax increase, and House Bill 475, better known as the Education Bill.
This should be a very interesting race for a number of reasons. The first factor involves the court-order redistricting plan known as 14B. For the first time since 1964, candidates in District 2 will have to run county-wide. The old district used to run from the northernmost part of Coeur d'Alene on up into Bonner County. Now with the new district, candidates will have to rely on the full Coeur d'Alene vote and south of there as well.
I guess I could say simply that I think 14B is a mistake. It will change the structure of politics in the state of Idaho dramatically. The people are so confused this time around that I really don't know if they'll be able to cast an intelligent ballot or not.
Judge Cogswell was right in the fact that it was unconstitutional to split county lines, to go across county lines with legislative districts. I think it was sad that the legislators didn't accept the fact to begin with and simply go on from there and let 14B stand.
I feel that perhaps, if anything, it might be an advantage to me because the people in Kootenai County probably know my name better than they do Dennis Carlson's.
I think that the voters of Kootenai County have shown that they prefer a more moderate Republican approach, a more moderate conservative approach to the politics.
A proposed lottery bill, similar to Washington's existing state lottery, has raised a lot of concern here in Idaho. Opponents of the bill claim it will not generate sufficient revenue, it won't lower taxes, and it will require a touchy constitutional change. Proponents claim that any issue that directly affects the citizens of Idaho should be decided by those citizens with a vote. Moore and Carlson certainly have their own opinions on the subject.
This country was built on the design of industry and thrift. And the attitude of gambling, lotteries are included in gambling, of course, that there's something for nothing out there, is that attitude and the mental thoughts of something for nothing is diametrically opposed to the attitude of industry and thrift.
What do you say to the argument that people in the state of Idaho should have had a chance to vote on the measure?
I've had people say, don't you trust us? And I say, yes, I trust you, but don't you trust me? You elected me to go to the legislature and try to understand with all the best of my ability while I am there full-time to understand these issues and to cast a ballot for you.
The voters do elect representatives to go to Boise to serve in their best interest, but most of the bills that are handled in Boise, a lot of them are housekeeping type bills, making sure that necessary legislation is cleaned up, making, I guess, establishing policy for the state of Idaho. Something as important as the lottery, and one that generated as much concern among the people of the state of Idaho as a lottery, I believe showed the need to put that out to the people to vote on.
The 1-cent sales tax increase will no doubt raise revenue to pay for programs and bills implemented by the legislature in the last session. The increase will have a direct relationship to House Bill 475 in that a large share of that tax will be used to fund the bill. House Bill 475 basically calls for 2 provisions. 1, to bring teacher salaries closer to the national average, and 2, to establish a career ladder system for teachers in Idaho.
House Bill 475 is something that people will have to contend with. It's a a bomb waiting to explode, because from our legislative budget office, I have figures that show that this fiscal year of '85, it will cost the taxpayer $23.5 million. Now that's the gross total cost when you include retirement and Social Security with the salary equity. But for fiscal year '86, we're mandating $50.9 million. And $50 million, or $51 million really, is just too much to saddle the next legislature with unless we want to have a 5 or a 6 cent sales tax. $50 million is just about what 1 cent will bring in sales tax. So I figure that House Bill 475 will mandate a 1 cent sales tax increase next year.
One of the things that you have to look at is where is the money going? Now we're looking at an educational system that ranks 50th in per student expenditure out of the 50 states. And we are having to look at how do we improve that. And I think that the proponents of the sales tax said we'll have to do it through the sales tax again. It hits a lot of people fairly equally.
Carlson feels that if Moore survives the primary, he will lose in November's general election.
I found that when I was working in Boise, representing the area farmers, that the people that I agreed with the most, the legislators down there, and the ones that seemed to work the best for us were the ones of the moderate Republican Party in Boise. And when the Democrats, this year, we knew fairly early, were going to run Mary Lou Reed against Bill Moore, I sat down and we assessed what was happening there, and I really feel that Mary Lou Reed would beat Bill Moore in the general election.
With a couple of possible exceptions, Moore feels he does have the backing of the Republican Party in this area.
I feel confident about my particular chances. I feel that Kootenai County is basically a conservative, has a conservative attitude, and I represent that conservative attitude. Neither my primary opponent, who 2 years ago was a Democrat and calls himself a middle-of-the-road moderate, or my Democrat opponent in the general election, who is a very liberal Democrat. Neither of those people, I feel, truly characterize the attitude of the voter in Kootenai County.
Finally tonight, a quick note on our coverage of these and other legislative races next Tuesday night, election night. Our statewide election coverage on Idaho Public Television will begin at 9 o'clock Mountain Time, 8 o'clock Pacific Time, Tuesday, May 22nd. In addition to the state's most comprehensive coverage of the Idaho vote, we'll have localized reports from Moscow, Pocatello, and Boise, where our reporters will track and report on dozens of local contests. And I'll be joined here by former Governor Cecil Andrus and Robert Smiley, who will provide the commentary on the statewide races and also lend years of political experience to our coverage. We'll have live reports from around the state, interviews and analysis, and we think you will find that we're the place to be on election night. We'll be back here tomorrow night with an 11th hour look at the hottest race in Idaho politics this year, so far at least, the Hansen-Adamson race for Congress. We'll see you then. I'm Mark Johnson. Good night.
The funding for this program is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and the Friends of 4, 10, and 12.